Harvard's Tempo magazine was repealed. And he wrote to the publisher of this paper with the sections
안녕하세요. 시간 내주셔서 감사합니다.
I've been fine, Chang'e. It's so good to be with you again.
하버드 대학교는 저널리즘 스쿨이 없는 걸로도 유명한데요. 하버드 님언재단의 역할이 뭔지 궁금합니다.
For generations now been a portal for journalists who come to Harvard to study subjects that they then are returning to the workforce, right? So whether they're studying international affairs or the arts or anything in between, it enriches journalism when they go back into the field. So that's one benefit. But I also think over the generations it's been a gift to the Harvard community, because as much as the journalists take away from this institution, we see evidence every year of how much people in the community here take from the journalists.
먼저 우리 영상을 보시고 나서 이야기 이어가면 좋을 것 같습니다.
So if I asked you to name a country where democracy has grown stronger in recent years, could you?
당시에 위기의 저널리즘이 민주주의를 위협한다라는 제목으로 저희 강연에서 말씀을 해주셨었는데요. 어제 푸틴 5번째로 지금 당선됐다는 소식이 전해지고 있고, 또 한국도 보면 브이댐 보고서라고 자유민주주의 정도를 보는 지수가 있는데 2022년도에는 저희가 17위였는데 지금 2024년에는 47위로 떨어집니다. 저희 좋아지려면 어떻게 해야 될지 좀 자문을 구하고 싶습니다.
You are right that there's been a decline.
Even though we wish they didn't write it, and even though we disapprove, there isn't any doubt that we couldn't do the job at all in a free society without a very, very active.
Journalism is one of those forces in a society that, as President Kennedy points out in that clip, brings about transparency and uncovers ills in society that politicians and voters need to be aware of. I don't think there's a simple answer, but I do think it takes people outside of the journalism community advocating on behalf of transparency that journalists and that reporting bring to societies across the globe. We need to understand this as not just the responsibility of those who are reporters and editors, but the responsibility of all of us as something really worth preserving if we wish to preserve democracy. It should be taught in the schools. Our students should all grow up understanding this as a value. We teach all kinds of civics and all kinds of things about government. Journalism needs to be embedded in that. It is one of the most powerful defenses on behalf of journalism I can imagine, which is a defense of democracy.
최근에 복합위기 시대가 되다 보니까 더더욱 좀 저널리즘이 중요해지는 시대가 아닌가. 그런데 문제는 지금 저희가 가치가 다르고 이념이 다르다는 이유로, 아니면 세대에 따라서 지금 보고 있는 미디어가 너무 다른 것 같아요.
Yes, it's a big problem in my country as well. There's a lot of division in terms of media presentation and how people interpret what they see and they hear. I really think we have to get back to a place where we really distinguish between factual reporting and news gathering and opinion and perspective. But what we're living through now is this period where people are really aggressively seeking out confirmation of their own biases, confirmation of their own opinions, and that's a very, very different impulse than the search for fact. And again, I don't know how we get past that without better education starting at a very early age in our homes and in our schools that are teaching consumers of news and information to distinguish between what somebody thinks and what somebody knows.
그 혐오 발언이나 혐오 댓글도 굉장히 큰 사회 이슈가 되고 있는데요. 그러니까 어디까지를 표현의 자유라고 우리가 봐야 할지 논쟁이 쉽지 않습니다.
I was just listening today to Acting President Garber talk about that. In protecting free speech and in advocating for free speech, we also have to effectively be advocates for respectful speech. So how do we create an environment here on the campus, on any campus, in any community, any town square, where we can disagree, where we can be diametrically opposed, neighbor to neighbor, about an issue, but we discuss it with mutual respect for each other, exchange, but where you're going at a subject or going at your disagreements from a position of mutual respect, trying to come to a place that's maybe better than either of you individually can imagine. And I think that's been a missing component, and it's certainly something that I know a lot of people are working on this campus.
그리고 전 세계적으로 지금 40억 명이 올해 선거를 하는 해인데요. 잘못된 정보나 허위 정보에 대한 위험이 굉장히 크게 또 부상을 하고 있습니다. 미국 언론들은 지금 미국 대선을 앞두고 어떤 대비를 좀 하고 있는지 궁금합니다.
You know, we had the great Nobel Prize-winning journalist Maria Ressa on campus last fall for our Neiman reunion for our 85th anniversary. She really set a very aggressive goal for journalists. One of the things that she is very seriously focused on is the impact of generative AI in coverage and in the entire political exercise. Very quickly understand and very quickly both embrace for good but control for ill the effects that those new technologies can have on our understanding what's happening in our political world. And so I think that is, I take her caution and her call to action very seriously, and I hope other journalists and newsrooms are doing the same. We have to head to the polls with a set of shared facts about our communities. And you can differ about how you hope those facts play out in the future. You can differ about opinions on any manner of public policy. But we have to get back to a place where we have a shared set, where we have shared knowledge. And that, I think, is really what we're fighting for this election. And I'm sure you're doing the same thing in Korea Changhae. It's as vital there as anywhere.
이 생성형 AI에 대해서 지금 언급을 해주셨는데 저널리즘 쪽에서도 이 새로운 플랫폼을 또 쫓아가는 게 맞는 건지 아니면 여전히 컨텐츠가 더 중요하다고 봐야 되는지 그런 부분이 좀 궁금합니다.
I think just in the way you asked it, you know, the answer has to be that we have to hold the content at the center of anything we do. But without, you know, just those sort of core fundamental values that we have held so closely journalistically for so long. I think without that, the quality of the platforms it has to be secondary. But we are absolutely consuming information in different ways than we were when you started the forum. And just that very fundamental change was, you know, it's just the obvious visual clue that whenever we gather and consume information, we're doing it in a fundamentally different way. You can look at something like Twitter and see the kind of roller coaster it's been on, and it may not last the next 20 years of the forum, but if it doesn't, something else is going to step into its place. The core journalistic values, those we have to hold on to. Those we have to really hold on to for dear life.
그 생성형 AI 시대를 맞아서 이제 언론인들도 이제 직업에 어떤 그 위기가 오는 게 아니냐 그런 얘기와 관련해서는 어떤 의견 갖고 계신지 궁금합니다.
Or just trying to acquaint myself with it. And there are times where I look at it and I kind of admire what it's come up with. Mostly it's, even on my worst days, it's a slightly lesser version of something I might produce when it comes to prose or documenting an event of some sort. The goal is that journalists get better in using it too, and so that the outcome is the technology is better, our use of it is enhanced, and that the public is better served. So I think you have to, run toward them, but learn how to come to understand them and learn how to grow with them and have them grow with you. Again, you're not a servant to the technologies, but you're learning how to use them to serve a higher purpose journalistically.
이 미래를 생각하는 데 있어서 앞으로 우리가 이 키워드 하나 정도는 좀 갖고 있으면 좋겠다. 키워드가 있으시면 좀 적어주셨으면 좋겠는데요.
Yes, I can. And in thinking about how much polarization there is here and in so many places around the world, I just wish for all of us that we had more curiosity about others, because that, as you well know, and as most journalists know, curiosity is the path to understanding. If we're curious about people, we ask questions. If we ask questions, we begin to understand in new ways. So to me, it is this superpower. And if more of us possessed it, I think the world would be a lot lovelier.
SBS D4럼이 올해 20주년을 맞았는데요. 응원의 말을 좀 전해주시면 좋겠습니다.
Happy anniversary, SBS D4. It's just such a special and inspirational mix of ideas and people, and it's so brilliantly and beautifully organized. So we feel very, very privileged to be invited to be a part of that conversation. I have no doubt that there's a much longer future ahead of you.
감사합니다. 이렇게 뵐 수 있어서 너무 반가웠고요. 또 하버드 임원 재단과의 인연이 계속 이어갈 수 있었으면 좋겠습니다. 고맙습니다.
Thank you.